The lender's office smelled of fresh paint and old money, the kind of combination that meant someone had recently renovated to look trustworthy. Marisol Vega sat in the client chair across from Glenn Pruitt's desk, her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap over a manila envelope that held everything her mother had left behind. The chair was leather, expensive, the sort of thing Pruitt had chosen so that the people who sat in it would feel the distance between his life and theirs. Marisol felt it. She noted it the way she noted most things, filed it away, and kept her face still. Pruitt set a document on the desk and slid it toward her with 2 fingers, the way a man slides something toward a dog he does not want to touch. 63,000, he said. That's the balance, including the processing arrears and the restructuring fees from the missed quarter. You have 14 days to sign the sale agreement, or the foreclosure filing goes in. Marisol looked at the number on the page. She had looked at it before, in the letters, in the certified mail she had signed for 3 weeks after her mother's funeral. The legitimate balance on the second mortgage was $41,000. She knew this because she had read every document twice. Once at the kitchen table with cold coffee, and once at the public library's copy machine with a yellow highlighter. $22,000 in fees had appeared from somewhere, itemized in language designed to make the itemization unreadable. I'd like the fee schedule in writing, she said, specifically the restructuring fees and when each one was assessed. Pruitt smiled. It was a patient smile, the smile of a man who had heard that request before and had never once honored it. Mrs. Vega, he said, lingering on the title with a small, deliberate pause that meant he knew she was no longer married and wanted her to know he knew. The fee schedule is in the addendum you were mailed. I understand this is a difficult time. Loss affects our ability to process information. He glanced at her coat, which was clean but not new, and at the scuff along the toe of her left boot. And the glance was brief and entirely intentional. The simplest path forward is the sale. There are buyers lined up. You'd walk away with something. She would walk away with nothing, and they both knew it. The house in Palmetto Park had belonged to her mother for 23 years. If the sale went through at the inflated balance, Marisol would see perhaps $4,000 after Leanne's. She was behind on her own rent, carrying 9-year-old Camilla on a school-aid salary and a freelance bookkeeping client who paid late every month. $4,000 was not a reset. It was a longer fall. I'll need the fee schedule, she said again, and stood. If you have ever sat across a desk from someone whose plan depends entirely on your exhaustion, leave a comment below. The story is just getting started. She left Pruitt's office with the manila envelope under her arm and the $63,000 demand folded inside it. On the bus home, she opened her mother's copy of the deed for the 4th time. And for the 4th time, she moved past the familiar names and the notary stamps to the line at the bottom she had not understood until the night before. The original mortgage from 11 years ago carried 2 signatures on the co-guarantor line. Her mother's, in the rounded cursive she had used for everything. And below it, in a smaller, cleaner hand, Reyes Holdings, LLC, authorized signatory. She had searched the name that night after Camilla was asleep. Reyes Holdings was registered in the state. Address listed with a registered agent on Meridian Avenue downtown. No website. No listed officers on the public filing beyond a single name she could not place. She went back the next morning. The building on Meridian Avenue had no sign above the door. There was a lobby with marble floors and a woman at a desk who looked at Marisol's coat and asked, very politely, whether she had an appointment. Marisol said she did not, and placed the deed on the desk and pointed to the co-guarantor line. I need to speak with whoever can explain this, she said. She waited for 40 minutes on a bench near the window, her manila envelope on her knees. The lobby was quiet in the specific way, well, that lobbies are quiet when the people who use them have decided the noise in the world does not apply to them. Two men in dark suits crossed the marble floor without looking at her, though she noted that both of them registered her exact position before pretending they hadn't. A third man, shorter, with an organized stillness in his posture, came out of the elevator and spoke briefly to the woman at the desk, who nodded toward Marisol. The man crossed the lobby. His name, she would learn in a moment, was Dario Reyes. "Ms. Vega," he said, "my cousin will see you now." She followed him into an elevator that opened directly into a corner office on the 11th floor, and the man who stood up from behind the desk was Edward Reyes. She noticed the window first, floor to ceiling, the city spread out below in the flat winter light. Then she noticed the desk, clean and uncluttered, with a single open file. Then she noticed him. The way you notice someone who has organized the air around himself without effort. A man in a charcoal suit whose eyes moved across her face with the careful attention of someone reading a document rather than appraising a person. He was not what Pruitt was. Pruitt looked at her coat. This man looked at her eyes. "You brought the deed?" he said. "You're on it," she said. He held out his hand. She gave it to him. He read it without sitting down, one hand flat on the desk, the document in the other. He read the co-guarantor line, and something changed in his face, very slightly, the way a window changes when a cloud passes, and then he was still again. "My father," he said. "He co-signed this 11 years ago." He set the deed on the desk and looked at her. "He passed 3 years ago. I'm still working through his arrangements." A pause, brief, controlled. "I didn't know about this one." Marisol absorbed this. "He knew my mother?" "Apparently." She wanted to ask how. She wanted to ask what arrangement meant, in this specific context, in this specific office. She asked neither. "There's a lender," she said instead. "He's claiming $63,000. The legitimate balance is 41. The other 22 is fabricated fees." She watched Edward's face while she said this. The change this time was not a cloud. It was something slower and more deliberate, a jaw that settled, a hand that closed flat on the desk. "Tell me the lender's name," he said. She told him. She had not finished the name before the lobby buzzer sounded from the desk phone. Dario answered it, listened, and said something low to Edward in a tone that had nothing casual in it. Edward looked at the phone, then at Marisol. "Glenn Pruitt is in the lobby," Dario said. Pruitt had followed her. She understood in the space of one breath that he had probably followed her from his office the morning before, had tracked where she went when she left without signing, had sent someone ahead or come himself to reroute whatever she was trying to do. He had not expected Reyes Holdings to be on the deed. He had counted on her not reading far enough. Edward moved to the elevator without raising his voice. "Bring her," he said to Dario, meaning Marisol. And the word was not an order aimed at her so much as a direction aimed at her safety, a distinction she felt in her sternum before she could name it. The lobby, when the elevator opened, had rearranged itself. The two men in dark suits stood at positions that had not been accidental. Dario stepped out first. Edward stepped out second and crossed the marble floor toward Pruitt, who was standing near the desk with the practiced ease of a man who had never once in his adult life walked into a room and found himself outranked. Pruitt saw Edward and recalculated. She could see it happening, a rapid, private arithmetic. "Mr. Reyes," Pruitt said, extending his hand. "I believe there's been a miscommunication. I'm here about a property matter involving the Vega estate. I wasn't aware of a connection to your organization. You weren't meant to be, Edward said. He did not take the offered hand. You sent Ms. Vega a demand for $63,000 on a $41,000 obligation. Pruitt's smile adjusted. The fees are documented in the addendum and are entirely in accordance with the contract's default provisions. My associate has been reviewing your fee schedule for the past 20 minutes, Edward said. And Marisol understood then that Dario's brief phone call upstairs had not been a warning. It had been the start of something. The restructuring fee assessed in January was added 3 weeks after the borrower died. The processing arrears were backdated. The documentation is fabricated. He said this without volume, without theater, with the flat certainty of a man describing geography. You have 14 days to withdraw the demand in writing, remedy the balance to $41,000, and produce the correction to the deed registry. If you prefer not to, Dario will explain your alternatives. Pruitt's script stopped working. She watched it happen, the way a composed face becomes a collection of parts when the organizing idea behind it fails. His mouth opened. "This is," he started. Then, "You can't just." Then finally, with something that had been confidence and was now a performance of confidence, "Ms. Vega signed nothing here. This is not your matter. Her name is on the deed I hold a co-guarantee on," Edward said. "That makes it my matter." He turned. The turn itself was the end of the conversation, and every person in the lobby received that information at the same moment. "Dario, Ms. Vega would like to go home." She did not speak in the car. Neither did Dario, which she was grateful for. He drove a black sedan with tinted windows and the patient competence of a man who had transported many people through many difficult afternoons. He pulled up to her building on Canary Street and handed her a card with a single phone number on it. "Mr. Reyes will want to speak with you tomorrow," he said. "The call is yours to make." She called at 9 the following morning. Over the next 2 weeks, things changed in ways she could not directly attribute to any single person. Pruitt's firm sent a written withdrawal of the inflated demand. The corrected balance of $41,000 was confirmed in a letter from the deed registry. A private legal firm she had never engaged sent her a notice that they had been retained on her behalf, and that the correction to the deed would be processed within 30 days. She did not receive a bill. She tried to ask Dario about the legal fees when he appeared at her door on a Tuesday, with a folder of documents and the air of a man who treated delivering paperwork with the same operational seriousness as a reconnaissance mission. "The firm is on retainer," he said. "On retainer with whom?" "With Reyes Holdings," he said, "which has an interest in the property's clear title. Standard practice." He set the folder on her kitchen counter with a care that bordered on ceremony. She called Lena Marsh from next door that night, because Lena was the only person she trusted to tell her when she was being foolish and when she was being prudent. And the two things sometimes looked identical from the inside. Lena sat at the kitchen table and read the fee withdrawal letter twice and said, "Marisol, the balance went down. That part is good. The part where a man you just met is paying your lawyers is worth asking about." Marisol agreed it was worth asking about. She asked about it the following Wednesday, when Edward's car came for her, as it had twice before, to take her to a meeting at his office. She had begun to notice small things about him across those visits. He was punctual. He read documents completely before speaking about them. He had on his desk, on the corner nearest the window, a small wooden chess piece, a rook worn smooth at the top that he never moved or touched during their meetings, but whose presence he was clearly aware of. "You're paying my legal fees," she said. "My organization has an interest in the title," he said. "That's what Dario told me. It's accurate. It's not the whole answer." He looked at her for a moment. She had learned to hold that look, not to look away from it the way she had the first time, when it had felt too much like being assessed. It was not assessment. It was attention. The specific attention of someone who noticed things and was deciding each time how much of what he noticed to speak aloud. My father made a commitment to someone who no longer needed it after she passed, he said. I don't leave his commitments unfinished. He paused. That would be the whole answer. She thought about her mother, who had never once mentioned Reyes Holdings, who had kept that co-signature in a file with her other important papers without explanation. 11 years of a commitment her mother had accepted and never told her daughter about. She thought about what kind of trust that required and what kind of person had earned it. She went home and pulled Camilla's school medical file from the drawer where she kept the household records. She had always known Camilla's allergy treatment was covered through a pediatric foundation whose name she had never fully tracked down. She had been grateful and incurious. The gratitude of a mother who cannot afford to examine too closely the things keeping her child functional. She sat at the kitchen table and read the payment history on the foundation's correspondence until she found the reference number of the originating account. She brought it to Edward the next day. He read the reference number, and she watched him go still in a way that was different from his usual containment. A stillness that had something private in it. 14 months, she said. Someone has been paying for Camilla's allergy treatments for 14 months. The account number traces back to a Reyes Holdings subsidiary. His jaw settled. He opened a drawer and removed a ledger, an actual paper ledger, and turned pages until he found what he was looking for. He read it once. She understood in that moment that he was seeing it for the first time, that his father had set up the account, and that it had continued running after his father died because no one had known to stop it. Her name is Camilla, he said. Yes. He set the ledger flat on the desk. Something in the room had shifted, and she felt it in the way she felt most things, through the specific awareness of her own body, a pressure releasing in her chest she hadn't known was there. Your mother had a daughter, he said slowly, working through his father's logic. His obligation extended. He looked up. Mine does too. She was not prepared for how that landed. She stayed longer than the meeting required. They moved from the office to the small kitchen off the hallway, where Edward made coffee in a French press with the focus of a man who had decided that this particular thing would be done correctly. And she stood at the counter with the city gray and wide below the window, and they talked about Camilla, about her mother, about the house on Canary Street where her mother had planted roses along the south fence every spring for 2 decades, and which had begun, in the past weeks, to feel less like something she was losing and more like something she was holding on to. He handed her the coffee. His hand came near hers, not touching, and she was aware of the nearness the way you are aware of a fire in a room. Not with alarm, with warmth, with the particular attention of a body that has been cold for a long time. I should get back, she said. Dario will drive you, he said. She looked at him for a moment longer than she needed to, and he looked back. And neither of them said the thing that was actually present in the room. She was not ready to say it. She was not sure she trusted that it was real. What she knew was that she was warm, and that Camilla's treatments were paid for, and that a man whose name had been on her mother's deed for 11 years had looked at her daughter's name in a ledger and said his obligation extended. That was enough for now to carry home. She did not tell Lena about the kitchen or the coffee or the nearness. She told Lena about the medical account and watched Lena's face move through surprise, then calculation, then the careful blankness of a friend who has decided to hold her opinions. Just be careful, Lena said. I am, Marisol said. She was not entirely careful. Across the next 3 weeks, she rode in Dario's sedan 4 more times. She sat in the 11th floor office while Edward worked through the deed paperwork with his lawyer. And she noticed that he explained each step to her without simplifying it, which she respected. She noticed that when she pushed back on a timeline, he adjusted the timeline. She noticed that when she said she preferred to keep Camilla's school routine intact rather than accept the offer of an interim apartment in a building Reyes Holdings owned on the north side of the city. He noted this without commentary and told Dario to increase the security rotation on Canary Street instead, as if her preference were simply a variable to be incorporated. The security rotation was how she learned, gradually, what his world actually required. Dario appeared one Friday morning with a small device that looked like a key fob, matte black, no branding. "Press and hold for 3 seconds," he said. "It sends a location and a status code to 4 numbers simultaneously. Me, Edward, 2 others." He set it on the counter beside her coffee cup. "It's not for emergencies exactly. It's for situations that might become emergencies. The distinction matters." She picked it up and turned it in her hand. "Is there a situation you're anticipating?" Dario was quiet for a beat, which she had come to recognize as his version of choosing his words carefully. There are people who pay attention when Edward makes decisions that protect someone outside the organization. They watch for openings. Another beat. "The device is a precaution. Press and hold." She put it in her coat pocket. 3 days later, she was at the school at pickup when she saw Lena's face across the parking lot and knew before Lena said a word that something was wrong. That Glenn Pruitt had been in the school parking lot that morning, apparently waiting. Lena had been dropping off a permission slip at the office and had seen him near Camilla's classroom wing, speaking to a man she didn't recognize. A man with a closely cut beard and a pale gray overcoat, who had the particular bearing of someone comfortable giving orders in low voices. Lena had not heard what was said. She had called Marisol twice, and the calls had gone to voicemail because Marisol had been on a bus with a dead battery. "He looked at Camilla," Lena said. "That man in the gray coat. He looked at her specifically." Marisol drove Camilla home that afternoon and did not tell her why she sat in the back seat of the car rather than the front. Camilla, who was 9 and watchful in the particular way of children who had learned early that their mother's quietness had gradations, said nothing and looked out the window with her coat bunched in her lap. That night, Marisol called Edward. She described the man in the gray coat. She described the overcoat and the beard and the particular quality of the way he had looked at her daughter. "Sergei Volkov," Edward said, after a silence that lasted exactly long enough to confirm this was not a name he was hearing for the first time. "He's been watching the Canary Street property for 10 days. He has a standing disagreement with my organization about a territory arrangement, and he has decided that acquiring leverage is a more efficient path than negotiation." His voice was level, careful, the voice of someone delivering a calculation. "I should have told you sooner. That's my error." "Is Camilla a target?" Marisol said, not a question. "She was not, until this week. She is now conditionally. He would take her to hold, not to harm. He wants a phone call, not a consequence." "Tell me what to do," she said. "Keep the device in your coat. Keep Camilla inside tomorrow. I will have a car at the school the morning after for a different route." A pause, and in it she heard the one moment of something that was not containment. "I'm sorry, Marisol." She had not heard him use her given name before. The single syllable at the start of it, the Mar, landed differently than she expected, settled somewhere below her ribs. Press and hold, she said. Press and hold, he said. She kept Camilla home the first day, which required inventing a stomach ailment and fielding 3 texts from the homeroom teacher. By the second morning, Camilla was restless and the pantry was low on cereal, and Marisol made the decision that she would not allow her daughter's life to compress into a locked apartment, because a man in a gray overcoat had looked at her once. She texted Dario the route she intended to take and received a confirmation in 20 seconds. She was 3 blocks from the school, Camilla's hand in hers, when the gray car came alongside them. It happened with the speed of something that had been planned. A door opened. A man she did not recognize spoke Camilla's name, specifically, quietly. And Camilla, who had been conditioned from infancy not to go with strangers, looked at her mother. Marisol met her daughter's eyes. "Don't," she said. The man was already at Camilla's other side. There were 2 of them and a driver, and the car was idling. Marisol's hand was already in her coat pocket. She pressed and held. Then she stepped in front of her daughter, squarely, and looked at the man nearest her, and said, in a voice she recognized as her own, but did not entirely remember deciding to use, "She doesn't go without me." The man looked at his partner. A calculation. "Fine," he said. She got into the car with Camilla because it was the only option that kept her between her daughter and what came next, and because she had sent the signal, and because she needed to buy time. Camilla sat pressed against her in the back seat, silent, not crying, with the coat bunched tight in her lap again, and Marisol kept her hand on Camilla's knee and counted the turns. 6 minutes. She was counting on 6 minutes. At the 3rd turn, the car slowed for a traffic signal. The door locks were electronic. She looked at the panel on the armrest, 3 buttons, and recognized the control pattern from the year she had bookkept for a fleet company and had processed maintenance logs for vehicles with identical interior configurations. The secondary release was a held combination. She pressed it. The door unlocked. She had the door open and Camilla out onto the sidewalk in the time it took the nearest man to register that the lock had given. And she ran, her hand on Camilla's wrist, not stopping. 2 storefronts down to the dry cleaner with the open sign in the window, where she pushed through the door and put her daughter behind the counter and told the man behind it, in a voice that did not waver, that she needed him to call the police and not open the door until she said. She leaned against the counter and breathed. Outside, across the glass, she could see the gray car still at the curb. The 2 men had not followed them inside. They were on their phones. They were not looking at the dry cleaner's door. They were looking at the black sedan that had come around the corner from the east. She would learn later from Dario that Edward had been 8 minutes away when the signal fired and 4 minutes away when the door unlock happened, and that the interval between those 2 events had resulted in certain decisions being made at speed that would otherwise have been made more deliberately. She did not ask what the decisions were specifically. She knew what they looked like in practice. She had seen the results in Dario's careful accounting of what Volkov's organization had lost over the subsequent 36 hours, rendered in plain declarative language, read to her in the passenger seat of the sedan on the way home. Volkov would not be reachable by phone or in person after that morning. His organization's claim to the territory arrangement was withdrawn. The gray car was gone. When they reached Canary Street, Edward was already there, standing on the sidewalk in front of the house, not in the car, not at the curb, on the sidewalk, which she understood was not his habit. His hands were at his sides, loose, and his jaw was set without anger, just set, fixed. And when she got out of the car with Camilla, he looked at her daughter first, a quick, thorough look that took inventory. And then he looked at Marisol. She had expected something formal. A report, a procedural briefing, the organized professionalism that was his default register with her. He said, "You opened the door yourself." "I knew the panel," she said. Something shifted in his face that she did not have a word for. Something that was not surprise but was adjacent to it. The look of a man receiving information that he had wanted to be true and that had turned out to be true. He held the house door open. She took Camilla inside. Lena was waiting in the kitchen because Lena had been on Canary Street when the sedan turned the corner and had understood enough of what she was seeing to go directly to the house and put on the kettle. She looked at Camilla, and she looked at Marisol, and she looked once at Edward standing in the doorway. And then she poured 3 cups and sat down. Marisol sat across from her. Camilla was on the couch in the next room with a blanket and the television on low, and the particular steadiness in her breathing told Marisol she was already drifting toward sleep, the way children do when the crisis has passed and the adults are present and the room is warm. "She's all right," Lena said. "She's all right," Marisol said. The deed correction came through 10 days later. The registered deed, filed and confirmed by the county, listed one owner of the house on Canary Street, Marisol Vega. The fabricated fees were formally voided in a written notice from Pruitt's firm, which Dario reported had been drafted by Pruitt himself at the recommendation of several people, whose recommendations he had found he could not decline. The $41,000 legitimate balance was settled in a separate arrangement she did not design and was not asked to approve. And when she told Edward she intended to repay it, he said without drama, "My father's account. Let it close properly." And she understood that this was both a practical statement and something else entirely, and she let it stand. Pruitt did not appear on Canary Street again. He did not appear at the school. He did not send letters. She ran into him once, in December, outside the post office on Fulton Street, and he saw her and went still in the particular way of a man who has recently been made to understand the dimensions of a miscalculation. He did not speak to her. He looked at the sidewalk and moved past her, and she watched him go and felt nothing except the clean and modest satisfaction of a person whose account has been settled. She told Lena about it that evening, and Lena said, without looking up from her crossword, "Good." Christmas came in layers that year, the way it does when a child is 9 and takes the season seriously. Camilla had made a list in November, ranked by priority, and had stapled it to the refrigerator with 3 staples for emphasis. She had also, without being asked, made a second list. Things she wanted the house to have. A wreath, white lights on the front fence, the good candles her grandmother had kept on the windowsill, and that Marisol had wrapped in tissue paper and put in a box in the closet after the funeral, because she had not been ready. Marisol got the box out of the closet. She set the candles on the windowsill in the middle of December, and the first evening she lit them, Camilla stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at them for a long time, and then came and stood beside her mother and leaned against her arm and said nothing. And the quiet was the kind that holds rather than empties. Lena came over on the 23rd with tamales and her oldest daughter's karaoke machine, which she set up on the living room floor and which resulted in 2 hours of Camilla performing songs she knew all the words to and Lena performing songs she knew approximately a third of the words to and which nobody corrected her on. Edward arrived in the evening in a dark coat with a bag that turned out to hold a chess set, a specific one, with weighted pieces and a folding board. And Camilla, who had never played, decided within 4 minutes of being shown the rules that she preferred to rearrange the pieces by height while explaining her organizational logic to Edward, who listened to this with the focused attention he gave to everything, and asked, apparently sincerely, what came after the tall ones. Lena watched this from across the room with an expression Marisol chose not to examine too closely. On Christmas Eve, after Camilla had gone to bed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from a day that has been genuinely good, Marisol and Edward stood on the porch together. The front fence had the white lights Camilla had requested. The street was quiet, a few cars, a neighbor walking a dog, the particular stillness of a city that has agreed to slow down for one night. A light snow was falling, the thin, honest kind that settles rather than piles, and it caught in the beam of the porch light in a way that made the whole block look deliberate. "She told me she wants to learn the night next," Edward said. "The night is the hardest one," Marisol said. "It's the only piece that doesn't move in a straight line." He looked at her. In the years she had known him, she had gotten better at holding his attention rather than deflecting it, and she held it now. "My father would have liked her," he said. She thought of 2 signatures on a deed, an anonymous account paying for 14 months of her daughter's medical care, a man she had never met who had made a commitment to her mother and had taught his son that commitments did not expire. "Tell me about him," she said. He told her about him. He talked for a long time, longer than she had heard him talk about anything. And she listened on the porch with the snow falling, and the lights on the fence, and the candles her mother had kept on the windowsill, casting a faint yellow warmth through the front window onto the porch boards between their feet. At some point, she stopped being cold. At some point, his hand found hers, and she let it, and did not look at it, and did not look away. She could hear Lena moving around in the kitchen inside, washing the last of the dishes, giving them the time she had clearly decided they needed. She could hear the soft pressure of the snow on the roof and the irregular click of the white lights on the fence that one strand always made in the cold. She could not hear Camilla, which meant Camilla was deeply asleep, which meant everything was where it was supposed to be. She had lived in this house as a child. She had painted the kitchen the wrong color when she was 15, and her mother had laughed and kept it. She had sat on this porch with a borrowed sweatshirt on the night her marriage ended, watching the street until the cold drove her inside, feeling the particular weight of being alone in a way that no other adult was going to fix for her. She had sat on the curb outside this house the morning of her mother's funeral and told herself the same thing, that she would figure it out, because she had always figured it out, and that figuring it out alone was simply what her life was. It had not occurred to her that morning that the deed she signed in the lawyer's office that afternoon carried a name she would find 11 months later. Edward's hand was warm. His thumb moved once, small and quiet, across her knuckles. "Marisol," he said. "I know," she said. Inside the house, on the windowsill, her mother's candles burned.